The parish of Portland can be found at the northeastern tip of Jamaica. It is situated to the north of St. Thomas and to the east of St. Mary. Portland is approximately 814 square kilometers in size. The parish is rugged, steep, and densely forested with stunning fortress-like mountains that merges into the Blue Mountains, Jamaica's highest mountain range. What we know today is that the parish of Portland came about long ago from the amalgamation of two parishes, namely the parishes of St. George's and St. Thomas. The original parish of Portland was created in 1723 by order of the then governor, Duke of Portland. Hence, the parish was named in his honor. Port Antonio, Portland's capital. The name of Port Antonio, the capital of Portland, is considered a very old name. For instance, on an early map by the Spaniards, Port Antonio is referred to as Puerto de Anton, and an even later map refers to it as Puerto de San Antonio. As early as 1582, the abbot Francisco Marque de Villalobos mentions it in a letter to Philip II. So it was not 1685, as our history school books would want us to think, that the name Port Antonio was mentioned. Earlier on, Portland was not always the size it is today. When the parish was formed in 1723, the Buff Bay area was not a part of the parish. Instead, it was a part of St. George. Long Bay or Manchaneel was not included either. Therefore, for many years, disagreement existed between St. Thomas in the east, Port Antonio, and the town of Titchfield. In 1779, Manchaneel was at last granted to the Portland Vestry. Later in 1867, the governor, Sir John Peter Grant, reduced the numbers of parish from 22 parishes to 14. So Buff Bay and Long Bay were at this point included into the parish of Portland. Settlement. In 1721, a more vigorous attempt was made to persuade immigrants from the British Isles to settle in the northeastern portion of the island. It is said that when Portland came into existence, anyone who settled there within 12 months were entitled to a barrel of flour and 2 barrels of beef on his or her arrival. This was an incentive to new ones who were willing to set up home in the parish. This generous inducement was to be handed over by a beneficent government of Port Antonio and was to be free of cost for a period of 3 years. Added to that, and in addition to the above, new settlers were to be exempt from all lawsuits. These benefits, however, proved ineffective, for it is noted that the inducements were only offered to new immigrants. No one in Jamaica believed the Northeast was a safe place, on account of the Maroons who had settlements there. It is said that under British rule, the Maroons were perhaps the first people to settle in Portland, and as a result, and along with the unfavorable climate there, not much interest was shown to this offer of settlement. It was not until 1725 that the benefits of laws were vainly extended to residents of the island. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed these historical videos. Another way in which the government tried to encourage settlement in Portland was empowering the governor to make land grants in the king name to every white person who were Protestant. 30 acres of land was to be allotted to every white person in a family, and to every free mulatto, Indian, or Negro, 20 acres. To every slave bought, 5 additional acres, with a stipulation that no one not having 15 white persons in their family should have above 400 acres. Guys, let me know if you understand that in the comment section down below. Another condition was that the grantees should settle and cultivate the land or some part thereof within 6 months from the date of the patent, and should not alienate the land for 7 years from that date. In addition to that, special provisions were given to intending settlers. The lands were to be cleared from all arrears of quit rent and all grants made without fees of office. The settlers were free from all taxes, general or parochial, for 7 years, except for quit rents. In 1743, settlers in Portland were granted the same privileges as those settling in Manchonil and Norman's Valley in St. Thomas in the east, that their passages were paid for them along with that of their slaves not exceeding 20, with the receiver general subsist them and their slaves for 12 months, based on the following measures. Each white person 4 barrels of beef and 400 pounds of biscuit or bread. Each slave a barrel of herrings and 400 pounds of biscuit or bread, with the number of slaves not exceeding 20. It is said that under the inducements of the laws passed between 1736 and 1752 over a 16-year period, 108 families and 15 artificers or skilled craftsmen were introduced into Portland. In 1780, all restrictions, conditions, penalties, and forfeitures imposed on settlers by the various acts of 1721 to 1776 were repealed. Following this, lands were to be held free from such restrictions, and therefore grants were to be made free, with a proviso except for those who had evaded the conditions of their grants within a 4-year time frame. Maroons and Portland. Originating from the Gold Coast of Africa and determined to free themselves from the chains of slavery, ex-slaves known as Maroons ran away from their slave masters and took to the hills to escape the barbarism of their captors. Much like St. Thomas, the Maroons' presence in the parish of Portland was very strong. The Eastern Maroons settled in the Blue Mountains in Portland and were joined by runaway slaves in St. Thomas and other parishes, thus forming the group known as the Windward Maroons. The Maroons of Portland greatly impacted the settlements of white people in the parish. The Maroons raided various towns in Portland and its environs, and historians have noted that for 76 years the assembly spent nearly £250,000 trying to defeat the brave Maroons in Portland. The Maroons were said to comprise of not more than 600 women and children. Qua, who emerged as the leader of the Eastern Maroons, was said to have a fighting force of only 300 men. In 1723, a group of volunteers captured the settlement of Moortown, but this was retaken by the Maroons the following year. The Windward Maroons continued to terrify a few inhabitants of Port Antonio when they captured 3 estates within 3 miles of Port Antonio. Other estates were plundered and then set alight, killing many. In 1774, while the Maroons were raiding Port Antonio, a group of volunteers led by Colonel Brooks captured Nannytown, one of the most important Maroon settlements at the time. Nannytown was strategically located between the Rio Grande and the Brock River, which is a large tributary of the Rio Grande, and had proved very difficult for the forces to reach when the river was in spate or flooded. This time, however, Colonel Brooks was able to reach the town before they could be discovered. Nannytown was the home of Nanny of the Maroons, the first and only national heroine of Jamaica. She was a celebrated Maroon chieftainess and was of the Ashanti tribe. She was said to have been a brave warrior who led her people in many successful battles against the cruel white settlers. In March 1738, Maroons in the west of the island, led by Codger, made a peace with the English. Qua decided upon the same, and the treaty was signed in June 1739. Historians say that Nanny did not agree with the treaty, since Portland Maroons were never defeated in war. In 1746, however, she signed a separate treaty with the English for which she received 500 acres of land. It is believed that this land is a part of the present site of Moortown. It is claimed that a slave named Coffee is the one to have killed Nanny, and that he was rewarded by the assembly. There is some debate about that story, however, as the Maroons denied that she was killed in this way or at that specific time. Instead, they asserted that she died in the 1750s. The capture of Nannytown did not mean defeat of the Maroons. They continued to build new settlements whilst plundering as many slave plantations as was possible. Agriculture, sugar and banana. Agriculture has always been an important aspect of Portland. Sugar plantations, which defined much of the cruel slavery period in Jamaica, were not widespread in Portland, primarily because of the strong Maroon presence that made it difficult for others to settle. Edward Long, a Jamaican planter and historian, notes that in 1768, 45 years after the parish was formed, only 29 sugar estates were found there. Nonetheless, as time went on, the number of estates increased. It is said that 38 large estates and more than 100 small properties and the cattle pens were established there. This rapid development, however, was accredited with peace being made between the white slave masters and the Maroons. Many of the place names in the parish of Portland today is a result of the names of old sugar estates. Names such as Snow Hill, Norwich, Prospect, Fairy Hill, Boston, and Egg Hill, among others. Of all the crops that were cultivated in Portland, banana crops were found to be the most important. Portland, it is said, owes its banana industry to an American captain named Lorenzo Doe Baker. He arrived in Jamaica in 1870 when the island was experiencing hardship due to the decline in sugarcane production, coupled with the loss of protected market for sugar. There were bananas growing around the countryside, but the wealthy planters of the parishes only thought of the banana as Negro food. They had no idea that banana could be so valuable to them. Baker saw the value of banana as an export crop. As a result, the banana industry, which he started, namely the Boston Fruit Company, later known as the United Fruit Company, was to save many Jamaicans from poverty. Historians note that Baker owed the idea to Captain Bush, who in 1869 visited Port Antonio in search of Gros Michel bananas. He acquired a load of bananas which he sold at a profit in Boston. The following year, in 1869, he arranged to buy bananas along with other fruit items on a more regular basis. It was merely by chance that Baker happened upon the banana trade. In 1871, on his way from Orinoco, he stopped over in Jamaica, anchoring at Morant Bay. There he loaded his ship with coconuts, coffee, pimento, banana, and bamboo. This, however, was an experiment. He was unsure whether Americans would like the fruit. On arriving in Boston, he quickly sold his cargo, and at a good price too. He returned to Jamaica and decided to make the banana business a regular venture. Landing in Port Antonio and hoping to get a cheap cargo of banana for his return, he found that a hurricane had recently caused damage to the town. Buildings were torn down and people were barely surviving without proper housing and food. Port Antonio was in a bad state. Captain Baker offered to buy the bananas from the natives of Portland at 25 cents per bunch. They quickly sold him 1,450 bunches of bananas, and upon his return to Boston, he again sold them at $2.50 and $3.25 per stem, making himself a substantial profit. Somebody do that maths for me please and put the answer in the comment section down below. Thank you. He eventually bought Bog Estate and the Bowden Estate. As time went on, the cultivation of banana in the parish of Portland grew, so Baker assisted in the prosperity of the parish and its people. However short-lived it may have been, it played a pivotal role in the agricultural development of Portland. Notable places or buildings in Portland. Titchfield Peninsula. This was the first place to be settled by the English and is known as the oldest settlement of the town. Folly Point Lighthouse. Built in 1888, its tower was constructed of masonry and is fireproof. Moortown, previously known as New Nannytown. Moortown was a stronghold of the Maroons. Today, Moortown is governed by a colonel, a Maroon given the honorary title earned by his ancestors. Seaman's Valley. On this property are the ruins of a great house and the first European cemetery in this area. Port Antonio Courthouse. It was erected in 1895 on the direction of the Colonel's Secretary. Portland Parish Church, also called Christ Church, is built on land indentured on the 3rd of September 1836. The Montevin Lodge, built in 1881 by the Honorable David Gideon, former custos of Portland, and is of Victorian architectural style. Many distinguished guests have visited and stayed at this lodge. such as Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, then Duchess of York, who visited in 1923, later referred to as Queen Elizabeth I, and popularly known as the Queen Mother. Queen Elizabeth II visited in 1953 and again in 1956. A room was also named the Queen's Room in her honor. Thank you so much for watching.